The First Amendment of the United States Constitution gives 5 freedoms to the American people. Each and every one of these freedoms is essential to fully giving the American people the freedom that they need to prosper in the new land that they built. Today, we're going to be studying one of those 5 rights. Today, we're going to be studying the right of the freedom of religion. Why did the founders feel like they need to add this freedom to the United States Constitution? Well, if we look at their history, then we will see why they felt it was important. If we turn the clock to 1517, we find the beginning of the Reformation. The Reformation began when Martin Luther decided that, hey guys, this might not be exactly what maybe the Catholic Church is not exactly everything that we hoped and dreamed it was. Maybe it is not, in fact, God's true church on the earth. So he decided that he was going to write a pamphlet, and he did, and this was called the 95 Theses. And from the Reformation, we got a lot of different religions. We got Methodists, we got Baptists, a lot of the different denominations came from the Reformation. It was very much a time of light, and it kind of began the Renaissance of trying to just explore the world a little bit more as we come out of the Dark Ages. In England, King Henry VIII was trying to divorce his wife, and the Catholic Church to which they were connected would not allow him to do that. So he decided that we were going to not deal with the Catholic Church anymore. The Catholic Church has nothing to do with the English government, and we're going to start our own church. So this was called the Church of England, and a lot of the people in England did not exactly believe in what the Church of England was doing. They thought it was a little bit too Catholic. A lot of the things like the relics and all of these different ideas were not exactly welcome to the Protestants because they didn't believe it was true. So there were 2 groups. There were the Pilgrims and the Puritans, and a lot of people group them together, but they're not exactly the same. I can understand why, and we will talk more about that later. But these 2 groups specifically decided, no, this is not right. So we had the Pilgrims. They were meeting in secret, and they were worshiping God the way that they wanted to in secret. They were being persecuted, they were being killed, some of them were being tortured and imprisoned. But in the end, they decided, okay, we can't make England work anymore if we're going to continue with our faith. So they left England and they went to Holland. And in Holland, they did have a lot more religious freedom, but they ran into a lot of cultural issues. They did not feel like they had the ability to raise their children the way that they wanted to raise their children. So in the end, they decided that they were going to go to America, and they were going to try and join the settlement kind of down by Virginia. On their way there, they did not go to Virginia. They ended up in Massachusetts and began the settlement of Plymouth. After all of that, what we saw is, so that was the Pilgrims. They ended up in Plymouth. They built the colony of Massachusetts. But the Puritans were going to go back to like the 1500s, and they were there and they were fighting. They were fighting so hard. If you look at the English Civil War, a lot of the people against King Charles I were all Puritans. You had people like Oliver Cromwell who were very strong Puritans, and he was actually considering going to America even before the Pilgrims were considering going to America so that he could continue. But he decided, no, I'm going to stay in England. I'm going to fight. But after the Pilgrims made their settlement in Massachusetts and the Puritans were just completely worn out of fighting. They felt it was a hopeless cause at this point. So they decided that they were going to leave England and they were going to go join the Pilgrims over in Massachusetts. So they both ended up in the same place. The Pilgrims and Puritans ended up in the same place, but they are not exactly the same because they did not have the same idea of how to carry out God's work. They did have one issue. They fled for religious purposes. They came to America for religious purposes, but they did not allow others the religious freedom that they enjoyed. They were not very accepting of a lot of the other ideas and a lot of the other denominations. For this very reason, some of the people that were in Massachusetts decided to go begin their own colony that would help provide and provoke religious freedom. So they went and established Rhode Island. Rhode Island was a very, very safe haven for people, a lot of different faiths to go to. And these two colonies were not the only two colonies that were established for the purposes of religious freedom. We had Pennsylvania, who was settled by the Quakers. We had Maryland, who was settled by the Catholics. And so many up in that New England area were all established for the reason that they wanted religious freedom. So you can imagine by the time it took them to make their own country and the Constitution was all written, many of them were saying, this is important that we put this in the Constitution because we are not going to allow non religious freedom to happen. They said, no, we are not going to have a government sponsored religion like you would see in Europe with the Church of England or the Catholic Church or so many of these other churches. Instead, they said, you get to worship the way that you wanted to worship, and the government is not going to stop you. This idea has been threatened ever since it's been put into the Constitution. And I think it's under attack now more than almost ever before. We have seen so many different aspects of taking religion out of public spaces in the idea of separation of church and state that became a very popular phrase. But I think we're missing a very crucial part in taking that out. We're not exactly supporting the First Amendment, specifically the right of religion anymore. We took prayer out of schools, and I am so blessed, guys. I live in this great state of Alabama, and I'm pleased to say that we just got prayer back in schools. I'm pretty sure that Oklahoma just did the same, and I think that we are beginning to have a lot of these states put prayer back in schools, that necessary prayer that we need. In the state of Tennessee, just north of me, uh, in Nashville, there was a very interesting story a couple of months ago. It was Ramadan, and this group of Muslim students were allowed to be taken out of class to do their prayers and and they didn't need to go to the cafeteria because they were fasting, and that's all great and dandy, right? That should be accepting religious freedom. Well, let's take a look at this. When was the last time we did that for Christian students? Because I'm pretty sure that if a group of Christians asked if they could leave class to do a prayer session in the gym or something, they would be kicked out. They would be taken out of that school so fast. And I think it's very important that we make sure that all religions are all having the same opportunity. I I have nothing fully against the Islam people. They have the right of religion. I do not agree with them on a lot of theological and a lot of different issues. I can make a different episode about that. I could spend a long time talking about that. I think it's important that we give them the same opportunities of freedom of religion as Christians. Now, when does freedom of religion go too far? Well, I've been thinking a lot about this question. Like, why don't we allow cults? Isn't that freedom of religion, freedom of expression? But it all comes down to natural rights. It all comes down to the rights that you have in nature. And if a person or the government is taking those rights away from somebody, it is up to the people to speak up. That's what the Declaration of Independence was all about. It says, when any government becomes destructive unto these ends, to the ends of taking away the natural freedoms, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. And we need to do that as American citizens. It's our duty as American citizens that when we see those rights taken away, to go and help those whose rights are being taken away and help them preserve those rights. And that's what we're seeing all over the place. And that's part of the reason we're going and helping Israel, because their rights are not being protected. But I think we're ignoring partly the lack of those rights in our own United States. In so many instances, we're seeing those rights slowly stripped away. And I think that it's important that each and every one of us takes a look at what is our state and what is our country doing that's taking away the right of religion and also these natural rights. And it's important that we, as American citizens, keep them accountable. That is a very large part. I have made an episode on going and voting on principles, not parties, because that is truly what it's all about. So you can go and you can say, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican and I'm going to vote for my party. What does your party represent? What does that person represent? Because honestly, that person could have very different views from the rest of their party. So stop blindly voting, guys. It's a really, really bad thing to be doing. Go study the person individually and figure out what they believe and if they are going to uphold those principles. And if you feel that, oh, wait, my state doesn't allow prayer in schools or something along those lines, and you want to go fight for that to happen, please do. Please go right to your congressman, go right to your representatives, go right to the people in your legislature, go right to these people because it makes a bigger difference than it then you'll see later that through other rights in the First Amendment, through the right of petition, go petition your leaders to make changes. We have that right in the First Amendment, and I will have more of an episode on that another time. But don't forget your rights. Understand what you're fighting for. Understand what needs to be fought for still. And I know that if we do that, we will have a much freer nation.